Welcome back to SuiteScript Stories. My name is Eric Grubaugh, and today I am joined by a special guest, Chris Morphopoulos, who runs the SuperTraining learning site. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Eric.
I appreciate your time. Tell me about SuperTraining and what it is and why you created it.
SuperTraining is a website that we have that basically has a number of different courses on NetSuite and how to use NetSuite. We're starting to get into a little bit more of the advanced content, also how to get your certifications, things like that. So
Yes.
people usually either know it from the website, and I also have a YouTube channel. So there's tons, I think I have like 150 videos on YouTube. That's where most people kind of stumble across it.
Yep.
And so that's really what it is. And then in terms of why, it was just kind of realizing in as a consultant that we're explaining the same things over and over again, and that there was a lack of adequate training content for these new guys coming in and doing their implementations, or even people wanting to become consultants or administrators. So realizing there was kind of a gap there, and that it was something that could be filled.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. That's why I made my YouTube channel way back in the day
Right.
too. Just there was nothing. There was nothing out there.
Yeah.
I'm always so excited to see other people creating content, sharing, collaborating, all of that good stuff. So I'm really excited to talk to you today. Really glad to have you on the show. Um, Before we go more into super training, how did you sort of get to this point? Tell us a little bit about your sort of NetSuite journey.
Well, as a kid, I always wanted to be a NetSuite celebrity. That
Didn't
was
we
my
all?
dream, right?
Didn't we all?
No, my background was in finance and accounting. So funny enough, I went to university up in Vancouver, Canada. Not that I was born in Vancouver, but I love the city. And I was working for like gold prospecting companies out there doing accounting
Okay,
for them. So it was this kind of very strange beginnings. And
sure.
it's a little bit like when you've worked in the accounting world long enough, you kind of just fall into some ERP software at some point along the line. It's pretty much
Hmm.
inevitable.
Yeah.
So I kind of fell into NetSuite and was doing the whole consulting thing. And like I mentioned earlier, just realized at a certain point that there was such a lack of training materials, just like good content, which I rely on YouTube constantly for how do I build my treadmill or how do I do anything, just like simple
Right.
stuff. It's such a great
For sure.
resource, and there was very little for NetSuite, and there was just not a lot of good official content. So I kind of as a side note, even though I've been in finance and accounting my whole life, and I would say I'm okay at it, it's never really been my passion per se. And a few years ago, I had kind of an epiphany for myself where I realized along my life that my favorite jobs were always teaching. So like the random instances where I'd be teaching people how to do video editing, or I'd teach people about finances, those were my favorite jobs, hands down. So I kind of
Wow.
realized I should start tilting in that direction where I'm actually doing that as a full-time job. And at the time I was working for a consulting company, and I went to the owner, who's a good friend of mine, Derek Hitchman. I don't know if you've seen him around or
Not familiar to me.
yeah. Anyways, he's a big deal in the community itself. He's pretty well connected, and I just went up to him and I said, "Listen, this is something that we could do. Do you mind kind of sponsoring me as we try this out?" And if you ever get a chance to meet Derek, he is hands down the nicest person, just like the most decent human being I've
Sure.
probably ever met. So he was very gracious and just kind of went, absolutely, do whatever you need to do. He kind of gave me carte blanche to test it out. And so
Awesome.
I kind of dove into that, started making videos that then turned into full length courses. And it just kind of started chugging along. And it's really only been in the last year and a half. I did my first video post about a year and a half from now.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
been a wild ride.
It happens fast sometimes.
Yeah,
Nothing at all and then all at once.
literally.
Uh, the I can tell you the passion shows in the both your YouTube channel and the courses on the site. Um, I love it. It's great to see. Really
Yeah.
fantastic material. Who is that material for?
So, I mean, I ask that question to myself a lot because I know people are coming at it from different angles.
Mm,
So, in general, I always approached it from a standpoint of like the pyramid concept of there's going to be the most people that need some kind of information at the bottom, And then as you go up the pyramid, it's going to be more and more focused and less people. So where when I first got started, a lot of people were trying to get me to, oh, I have questions on this really hard technical stuff. And I just realized it's just not fruitful to go, well, I'm going to focus on these really specific problems. It's better just start at the very bottom. Like everyone needs to log into NetSuite. Why don't I
Yeah.
make a video on how to log into NetSuite? Even though it
There
seems
are
dumb.
always new
It's
beginners.
right. And so I really just focused on that element of just what are the absolute foundational things for NetSuite, and then just kind of build every stone along the way, kind of moving up the pyramid. And so in terms of exact types of people, I found that it was a lot of people that want to get into the ecosystem. So they already have a job doing something, in some cases, totally disrelated. In some instances, they're already accountants for other companies. They know they want to get a job for a company that uses NetSuite. So they're looking to get that on their resume. That's, I would say, the majority. But I'm starting to get more and more now companies that know they need to do an implementation. And so they're buying whole packages to take them through that.
Okay. Like get the whole team up to speed on
Yeah,
different roles.
that's happening more and more now.
That's awesome. That
Yeah,
has to be some great momentum.
yeah.
Are there specific roles? We don't have to go through like the litany of all the videos you have and all the courses you have, but are there specific roles that either are that's really suited for or it's not suited for, right? Can I send my developers there? Can I send my admins there? Can I send my
Well, I
accountants there?
printed a list of every video I've ever made, so I'm just going to run through it
Oh
in
no.
alphabetical order.
We'll link to
No,
your YouTube channel. How about
yeah,
that?
exactly. So at this point, I've done 14 courses, and
Okay.
as I mentioned, in my opinion, I've just about finished all of the fundamentals. So everything from like the absolute basics of NetSuite that any user would have to know to
Okay.
like the intro to being an administrator, accounting, sales, order to cash, project management, things like that, inventory management and manufacturing. I've just recently finished up everything I consider like it's a crime not to have these courses. And now I'm starting to eat my way into the more intermediate content. So I'm making the ERP consultant, that examination, the prep course for that, which is definitely like more intermediate slash advanced level. And then after that, I'm going to be doing MRP. So that's definitely getting into the more intermediate level for inventory management. So I'm starting to chew my way into that. I would say, I mean, yeah, really for anyone who's newer in the space, or for people who are programmers and they don't know the functional side that well, I'd say that's
Yeah,
probably a good fit. Anyone who's been
absolutely.
around the block for any more than 3 years, unless they have just an area that they're weak on, like I do have some people where they're really good in certain areas like accounting, but they just don't know manufacturing and they've never been able to confront it. Then I say, okay, we'll just focus on that one thing or certifications. So there's plenty of people that have been around for years. They've never, either tried or never managed to pass the ERP consultant certification.
Right.
Those are the only ones I'd say, people who are in the intermediate to upper levels could probably get something out of it.
Fantastic. Yeah, that was absolutely going to be my recommendation. The audience here is mostly devs and admins, so a little more on the
Mm-hmm.
technical than the functional side, but
Sure.
getting that I'm always harping on trying to get that well-rounded, like you should know the functional side, know what your
Yeah.
users are doing, know what their vocabulary is, and talk like they do. So using
Yeah.
this as a resource for getting that functional knowledge as well is equally useful for functional resources and technical resources as well.
Yeah. I mean,
Now
it's kind of hard to program in something if you don't even know the
yeah,
environment that you're interacting in.
it really is. If you can't have a conversation with your users, it's going to be hard to make something useful for them.
Totally.
Um, we initially started talking and wanted to get you on the show because you did recently partner with someone to make a developer course. Can
Mm-hmm.
you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll probably talk more about this later. I have a lot of interest in
Sure.
programming. I'm a complete novice. Like I know absolutely nothing about programming, which is funny because my brother is like a JPL, like science whiz nerd.
Okay.
So he's
Very
always been
nice.
the techie one. I've always realized that's something I should be more trained on. And so again, I'll ask you some questions on that side of things. But
I
early
know a
on when I
guy.
start, there you go. I realized that I should not just have functional side, but I should also have something on the technical side. even though I don't know anything. So I started looking around for who could I partner with to make that content. I originally, funny enough, I was going to do someone you interviewed, Adam Smith. He
Yeah.
got me introduced to you guys because he showed me Suite Digest that Tim has,
Yes.
Tim Dietrich. And
Yep.
so I first started checking that out. Then I found your guys' podcast. Then I mentioned it to Adam, and he said, "Oh, I was just on it just 2 weeks ago." And so I was thinking about doing it with Adam. He's obviously one of the best programmers in the space. So I was trying to set that up. It didn't work out super well. He's pretty far from where I'm in the Tampa Bay area, and he's
Okay.
so busy that it just didn't end up working out. But he had
Sure.
kind of like a protege that's worked under him, named Zach Romancic, a kid who's very, very talented as a programmer. And I mentioned it to him, and he was like, absolutely, I'll come over like immediately. So we
Awesome.
did it in a few different sessions. He came over and we recorded all day, bless his heart, which is
That's
very hard to
tough.
do.
That's a
People
long
think it's
day.
easy to make recordings. I can promise you it is no easy feat to talk for that long.
Yeah. You've never done it, is what I can say to that. It's like, if you think it's easy,
Exactly.
you've clearly never done it.
Yeah, there's so many elements of video production. And so anyways, he was a great sport with that. And we basically made this developers course, which was interesting for me, knowing so little about where to even begin as a developer. I had to rely on Zach and Adam a lot for guidance in terms of, what's the right place to start. Like, we're not teaching these guys JavaScript. We're assuming they know JavaScript, and we're going to teach them the SuiteScript side of things. So we got a lot of feedback from them. I consider that my few skills amongst many things I'm bad at, is taking complicated things and figuring out how to deliver them as simple as possible. So these guys know a lot about how these things work, and I use the information they have to kind of try to break down a curricula that was really simple and easy to kind of bite your teeth into. And then we just kind of rolled through that. And so we made a course where we go over a lot of the key script types, some concepts on governance. We have some videos that are just practical examples how to implement the various script types. And I think in the end it came out really well. We've gotten a lot of good feedback from the students, and I'd be interested in doing more advanced content later, but not too soon, because
Sure.
it was much harder to make than any of my other courses. Because it's
Yeah.
usually I'm a one-man band, so
Mhm.
just being the actor and the editor and the director and everything at once is way easier than having to work with another person that you have to kind of, I mean, even just scheduling it can be a bit more complicated.
Right. Yeah. Scheduling, especially if you need multiple sessions,
Yeah,
it interrupts your workflow if they're 2 weeks apart or something like that. You
definitely.
want to get them done as condensed a time frame as possible.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. There's something beautiful about, like, I was recording at 11 o'clock last night. I know, okay, I want to do this video. I just go over there, I sit down, I record. I don't have to wait for anyone. I don't have to coordinate or anything. It's nice being to have everything in house is pretty convenient.
as a solo practitioner myself, I get it and I agree.
Yeah.
Well, the passion is clear. Again, I said it comes through in your YouTube channel, but it's also coming through right now. And I love to see it. It's infectious.
Oh, I could talk so much about education. I love it.
What have been some of the bigger challenges in creating, and then running super training?
A lot of people come to me for advice, whether friends or family, on like advice on making a YouTube channel. Not to say I have some like amazing YouTube channel. It's like 9,000 subscribers, but it's, they'll have some interest in something and they'll come to me for advice. I think for most people, the hard part is the technical by far. What kind of camera, what's the lighting like? What's the audio? What's the set? There's all these things that people don't think with the editing. Is like, every one of these is like an art in itself. And in any
Yeah.
film, you have like a guy who's literally their whole life, they've only handled lighting. And so to be able to like jack of all trades everything at once is, I think, the biggest barrier for most people. For me, I actually have a background in videography. For a few years, I kind of split off, and I love movies and things like that. So I was an editor. I actually lived in Hollywood for a while. I was an editor. I did some documentary editing, and I would get a little bit on lighting and filming. And so I actually kind of had that part was easy for me. Like it took me a little bit to get it perfect, like exactly what I wanted it to look like, but it wasn't that much of a barrier. The hardest part for me, I think, was being on camera and talking and just I originally didn't want it to be me. I talked to Derek and I thought, okay, well, I'll handle all the technical and I'll make sure the content and the curriculum's great. And then we'll get not an actor because you can't really fake it, but like a good consultant who's really smooth and charismatic. I'll just get somebody. And we were going back and forth. And finally, Derek was like, well, why don't you just do it? It's like, I don't want to do it. I really, really don't want to do it. And then he kind of just convinced me to try it. And then it ended up being a lot more convenient, but it's a whole world like talking on camera and not being self-conscious and being able to just not stumble constantly when you're going through technical things. It's so difficult.
Knowing where to look, not
Yeah,
look silly or foolish, and just like little
absolutely.
stuff like that takes a long time to get right. And not even,
Yeah.
not that I do it perfectly either, but it's passable at least, and it takes a long time just to get it to be passable. A lot of practice.
Yeah. Totally. And also, even though there was things that I knew about NetSuite, it's hard to just take something that you might know and go like, I don't know why it is this way, but like I know I can do it. And
Mhm.
then go, well, how do I explain this? And then you realize, well, I can't really just explain this one thing. I probably should explain this whole subject. And then you kind of have to keep undercutting yourself and going, all right, well, man, I guess that means I need to explain this too. And like, what's the best way to approach this? And then kind of what you'd mentioned earlier of like, who's the audience? I constantly have to ask myself, am I talking to people that already know manufacturing really well and I'm just showing them how to do it in NetSuite? Or do I have to assume they've never seen a factory and they have no idea what it means to make a pen and all of these things? So I have to find that happy medium of where
Yeah.
to approach the subject is pretty tricky.
It really is. Knowing sort of, yeah, especially who it's for, sort of what
Hmm.
level are we targeting, and then knowing where to draw the boundaries on the topic. Because yeah, if you
Yeah.
really if you're like, I'm going to teach everything there is to know about topic X, well, topic X in NetSuite is connected to Y and Z and Q and B. Like you
Yeah.
have to be able to like, if you tried to explain everything, every video is going to be 5 hours long.
Yeah.
So you've got to be rigorous and ruthless about drawing those boundaries. Like, okay, they're just going to have that question, and I'll answer that question in another video.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
You
where,
constantly like mid inventory management going, I'm not going to talk about manufacturing here.
yeah, yeah. Where do you, especially when you are sort of maybe out of your depth a little bit, something you're less familiar with, where do you go to get your information, your resources? How do you pull that educational content together, whether you do know the subject or maybe you don't know it as well? Where do you go get, what are your sources? How do you go about that?
It's a great question. I rely on other consultants a lot. And I would say the majority of the content that I've made, even if it's a subject I feel pretty confident on, I will always talk to at least one or two other consultants about it. And in some subjects that I'm like, oh, I feel like I have a little bit of grasp or I don't know anything about, even if I will talk to one consultant and be like, okay, I get it now, I'll go talk to three other consultants to hear their viewpoints because they'll have their own perspective and they'll have just insights that are really interesting. I very rarely find when I talk to multiple people on the same subject, they almost never say the same thing. They'll
Yeah.
always just approach it from a different angle. One will have like a shortcut that's cool, or they'll mention one particular thing that's like, wow, that's a great way to position it. So that's kind of like what I've really tried to do in all the courses is make sure that it's not just my perspective, but it's kind of like a broader, almost like a community agreed upon, this is a best practice for handling this. And in terms of where I find these people, there's just a lot of consultants I've worked with in the past. As I mentioned, I worked at Derek's company for a while. He had a number of consultants that I've stayed in touch with. You just meet other consultants. So there's a lot of guys that work at other consulting companies that I've been able to collaborate with, and they've been happy to meet with me. So I would say in any given week, I meet with maybe four or five consultants every week.
Wow.
Yeah.
What else should people know about super training? Is there anything you want to share? Like what you shared a little bit, maybe vaguely. What's coming up next? What's on your plate right now?
What's on the radar? That's a good question. I have done, like I said, I feel like I finally handled the like burning fires of the like urgent stuff.
Yeah.
And and I mean, I was getting hounded. Like I had this one client because yeah, I'm sure you run into the same thing. People say, "Well, when is this going to be done?" And you go, "Wow, I'll probably be done with that by the end of the month." And the end of the month comes, and then you realize you're not going to have it done until the next month. So I had this one student that was just hounding me for months for a manufacturing course. And I finally started recording it and like uploading it one video at a time so that he could at least like see something because I kept promising and I kept pushing back the deadline. So I finally feel like I've done the major stuff. I no longer have people just like pounding on these specific topics. And now I'm digging into that intermediate level of I want to take everything that I've done and just take it a step further, like
Okay.
more detailed workflows, more detailed accounting mechanics, things like that. Obviously, I'm doing MRP next. And then at some point, I don't know if I'm going to go into the advanced content
Sure.
because that top of the pyramid, I feel like there's so few people that need that.
Mhm.
And it gets harder and harder to make it. So it's like, do I want to spend way more time for a course that's way less people are going to be interested in? And then is
Yeah.
it the best use of my time? So I don't know if I'll go deep into the advanced stuff, but I'll at least do a round of the intermediate content now that I've handled the foundational stuff.
Yeah. That's the tough part about that, the top of that pyramid is
Yeah.
there's just way fewer people up there, and usually by then they are resourceful enough to find the answers they need.
Yeah.
But
And
the
there's
only
other
way to,
people,
yeah,
you
exactly.
know?
They've got big networks, they've got resources,
Right.
and the only way to make that worth it is to charge a lot for it,
Yeah.
and that may or may not fit, your business model.
Right.
Which brings me to a good question. What is sort of the pricing model, and how does um, you know how do people access the super training content?
There's obviously the YouTube videos. I usually take a third of the content that I make roughly and I post it on YouTube. Honestly, it's really the only marketing thing I do. I don't pay for ads or anything like that. So it's all been kind of organic. People look it up on YouTube or they Google it and then the YouTube video comes up. And so there's a lot of content on YouTube. That would be the first thing I tell people because
For
I get a
sure.
lot of people from the Philippines or India will say, I can't afford it. And I totally understand.
Yeah.
And I say, like, listen, just go access the YouTube. I mean, there's like 150 videos. Also, the YouTube videos tend to be longer, so it's pretty beefy.
Hmm.
And that's kind of that realm. And then on the courses, I originally had the courses when I first started, I sold them for like $50. They were like crazy cheap for everything.
Yeah.
And then over time, I've realized like, okay, I can raise them up a little bit. I've gotten to a point where I'm not really comfortable raising them anymore. It just doesn't, I don't know why, but there's a certain point where I was like, I don't feel right charging more. I mean, they're pretty
Yeah.
expensive as it is. So I've hit a
Hmm.
point where I've gone, all right, that's enough. Even though I probably could keep raising it and maybe get less sales but more revenue, I just don't want to. And I want to make it.
Yeah.
I'd rather have more students and less money. So I hit that point. And then what I'm focusing on now is making these packages. Like more and more, I just sell packages. So I've got so many courses, and now I'm adding more and more that people look at each course and they go like, wow, the course is $150. I want four. That's the same cost as a package for 14 courses. Why don't I just get the full package, which I'm more than happy to go with that route.
That's the pricing model you want, the no-brainer.
Exactly. I mean, and it's a nice business model. Like the first year and a half was painful where you don't make any money.
Yeah.
But then it gets to a point where I would say last month is the first point where we really hit it where
Hmm.
it's now making more literally no maintenance and I can just focus on doing the new course and the next project, which is great.
Yeah. I mean, that's not only a good thing for you, obviously it's great for you, but it's also great for the student where it is that self-driven enough that they're not waiting on
Hmm.
you, they're not waiting on anyone else. They get to go at their own pace, whether that's
Hmm.
breakneck or, languishing on the beach. They get to go
Hmm.
at their own pace, and they're never waiting for anyone else. So
Yeah,
they don't have those barriers. The only barriers are their own. No
totally.
one else can help them with
And
those
those can be barriers enough in their own right. So yeah.
exactly. That's great. Is there anything else you think we should touch on? Is there anything else I missed, didn't ask
I
about that you
mean,
really wanted to talk about?
I mean, there's things I was curious about from your standpoint.
Oh,
I
sure.
was kind of curious. I've seen your video on how you got into this world, but I'm curious
Yeah.
as a person who's been in videography, how you approached it from that standpoint. Like, for example, you had this video, which is brilliant, where you put your screen recording, almost like a loom. You have it in the screen.
Hmm.
And I see so few any educational content like that. And because I do that in my own videos, and I saw another person do that, and I was like, that's brilliant, where you can actually see the instructor while he's going through his videos. So I'm just kind of curious, like how you approach that and how you kind of came to those things.
Haphazardly. I don't have any background in any sort of video, audio, like no media whatsoever. I have been a developer since I was 16 years old. Like
Yeah.
that's that is all I've ever done. So probably the same way you mentioned earlier that you gain a lot of your skills, a whole lot of YouTube, just a
Yeah.
whole lot, a ridiculous amount of YouTube. So dog fooding a little bit using the platform I use to publish on. Um,
Yeah.
it took a long time. It took a long time. It took agonizing amounts of hours to get my audio the way that I wanted, to
Hmm.
figure out lighting, to figure out which lights to buy, then figure out where to put them, then figure out how to set them up so I don't have to move them every time. Like
Hmm.
months and months, it's just an evolution over time. If you out there in the audience, if you are thinking about starting a podcast, a YouTube channel, whatever, get started because there will always be a barrier to like
Hmm.
trying to get it perfect. There are so many skills that you need to, and skills and gear and habits and all that stuff. Like, so yeah, for me, it was just a lot of YouTube, a lot of do it yourself, just agonizing over which lights to pick, and then finally just throwing my hands up like that one, just pick one and try it.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, I'll fine, I'll figure it out. But
I think that's like one of the best advices. People agonize over like which one to get. Like the number of emails I get, and people are like, "Which camera?" I'm like, "Dude, that doesn't even matter. Just get a camera.
use
Just
your
film
phone.
something.
Use
Yeah,
your
who
phone.
cares?"
Just use your phone. Um, just get started. The best
Yeah,
way to have a good podcast, a good YouTube channel, whatever, is to start out with a bad or an okay
yeah,
podcast and YouTube channel and just keep going. And
totally.
every episode, make one little tiny thing better. Fix your
Yeah,
audio a little bit, fix your lighting, whatever it is. Every episode, make one thing better. And that's how I got here. I imagine you at least had the background and like sounds like you had some very classical or professional education in a lot of this stuff. That sounds magical. But
yeah,
when I look back, like the most entertaining, the most fulfilling positions were ones where I was guiding, teaching, coaching,
hmm,
that sort of thing, leading, in that like mentorship role. So that's how I jumped into this as well. I saw that gap, like man, there's no one out here teaching stuff. Uh,
hmm.
there's no YouTube channels. There's no nothing, no blogs. There
Yeah.
was Marty
It's
Zigman was
crazy,
the
isn't it?
only person blogging when I started publishing YouTube videos.
Yeah,
And now it's fantastic to see that. I feel like the content, the educational, just the access to NetSuite information has really exploded as the community has grown, and that is
hmm,
encouraging to see for sure.
yeah. I mean, one person at a time, right?
Absolutely, that's all you can do.
Well, listen, I had one other thing I was curious to get your opinion on.
Yeah, you really turned this around on me.
Yeah,
I feel like
man,
I'm on your show.
I had questions for you. I'm curious. Do you go to Sweet World? Have you been there
I
recently?
have. I haven't gone recently, but I
Okay.
did. I went like 2016 through 2018. I think I went to three in a row, and that was the last time I was there.
So the last couple years, they've really gone hard on AI and like everything's AI and oh my
Yep.
God, and they have all this.
Yep.
So NetSuite's really partnered with Cohere. They're trying to roll out all these AI products. I was curious what your viewpoint was on what they've rolled out so far and where, not even that where you see them going, but where you think is the best place for them to go with AI.
I don't know. I don't talking about playing around with stuff and getting your hands
Hmm.
dirty. I haven't done it enough
Hmm.
with the AI tools, especially the NetSuite ones. I'm playing around a little bit with developer stuff like Copilot
Yeah.
and did a little bit of ChatGPT for a while. I made a video about ChatGPT and SuiteScript. It didn't do a good job, but it will eventually, for sure.
Yeah.
Which in general, the more time and energy and money that's invested in these models, they're gonna get better, right? They're only
Yeah.
gonna get better, and all the trends would say that that's where businesses, especially huge ones, are investing a lot
Hmm.
of money, NetSuite, Oracle included. So there's
Hmm.
going to be a lot of progress, and I don't know that anyone knows where that's going to go. But um, yeah, for like developers especially, I would love to see. Honestly, I would love to see any development, any progress in their development tools, in the developer experience, whatever that
Hmm.
is. So if that's a Copilot like little coding assistant, awesome, great, let's do that. If
Did you find
that's
Copilot was helpful?
yes and no. Um, Mostly yes, it was helpful for sure.
Hmm.
It was very good at picking up on sort of my style and then like predicting what I wanted to write and doing it in my style. It was
Mm.
surprisingly good at that pretty quickly,
Wow.
um, which was very cool. I think other things that it's that the right now AI or LLMs are good at with in relation to coding is things like generating test frameworks. So if I want to automate testing and I have a specific, I don't know, a module, maybe there's a
Hmm.
RESTlet that I want to test and I have this or an integration. And if I can tell it, here's what the input data looks like, here's what the output data looks like, here's the methods in my API,
Hmm.
generate a unit test suite for that, it will spit out that framework pretty quickly, way faster than
Hmm.
I would ever do, and it will test things that I wouldn't have thought of. So that sort of tooling is extremely useful, I think. The value of a developer is not the typing of the code. And so if you
Sure.
can um, sort of hand that off to a tool, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
The value
The
of a
mundane
developer
stuff.
is connecting that code to a business's, in our niche, a business's problems and
Hmm.
applying it and solving those problems. So it doesn't matter who or what writes types out the code. It matters that the output of the code improves the business.
Right. That vision is
And that's a
set
big
by
change.
the programmer.
Mhm.
Yeah, makes
So
sense, man.
Tim and I did an episode on AI a bit ago, and obviously you can't escape it in the general conversation. But
Yeah.
yeah, lots of mixed feelings, which is part of the reason I'm not like throwing myself, wholeheartedly into it. If you are out there, great, go with the gods. Um, I know that I need to be aware of it and follow it for my students, right? It's going to be part of the developer career, whether we like it or not. So
Yeah.
I still have to keep abreast and play around with it myself, but I'm not a, bleeding edge adopter right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Not given into the robot overlords just yet.
What about you? Are we going to see AI generated courses on super training?
Not AI. Wow, I'd love to get, they have some pretty cool tools that will actually edit like podcasts like this, where you can put in both camera feeds and it will properly, I mean, the system even tries to do it when people are talking, it'll recognize, on a Zoom call with a group, it'll try to put that person on screen. So there's
Yeah.
some ones that edit those. So if they can get as good to edit one camera, so every time I stop and I swear for 3 minutes and then I pick back up, it can just cut that part out and
Uh-huh.
seamlessly stitch it back together. That'd be amazing. I have high hopes for that. But
Yes.
I mean, I do have more high hopes for AI with NetSuite in general.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, I hope the stuff they've come out with so far, I have tinkered around with, haven't been that impressed. But
Mhm.
the things that they say, the direction they say they want to go in, I feel is really exciting. And I agree with that direction. I just, I don't see it yet. So I'm kind of, you can say a lot of things, but it's a tough task. So we'll
Yeah,
see
absolutely.
how closely they get to it.
The rubber has to meet the road at some point. Yeah,
Yeah.
my editing software does have an AI tool that is supposed to do that sort of
Hmm.
both with audio and video, like trim it down for you. And I tried it. I've tried it a bunch, and I don't like the output, and it's not
Hmm.
that configurable. It gets way too like clipped and fast. Like
Hmm.
the conversation feels really rushed when it's done,
Right.
and there's no configuration in it. If I could just tell it like, hey, pause, X amount um, between the cuts that you do, I think
Hmm.
I think it would be pretty good.
Yeah.
It's good at cutting out all my ums and ahs and hesitations for the most part. But
Yeah.
it just when it's done, the conversation just feels like we are, I don't know, yeah, rushing.
Because there's no breathing room to
There's
have those
no one's
pauses.
breathing. Everyone is in one single breath for an hour. And so
Yeah.
it just I don't like the finished product. So I'm sure it will get there, right? These things
Yeah.
will be more flexible and configurable and sort of interactive as they progress. Right
Yeah.
now, it's just kind of you give it input and it gives you the output, and that's about it.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm sure we'll see more and more features and customization in all of these kinds of tools. Lots more personalization. I feel
Yeah.
like that's an ironic use of that word there, but
And for the record, for anyone listening, Eric and I both did not breathe once in this interview.
yeah,
So
I'm still
just want to
holding
make
my
that
breath.
very clear. Yeah.
Faces are both very blue. All
Awesome.
right.
Well, I
Well,
appreciate you taking the time, man.
yeah. I appreciate you being here, sharing with us. What is the best way for listeners to find out more about you, about super training? What's the best way for them to get in touch and take their first steps?
So probably the easiest way is just find me on YouTube. If you search, honestly, you don't even need to search super training. If you just search NetSuite something like NetSuite FAM or accounting or like administrators, my videos will always come up somewhere in the top three or four.
Mhm.
You'll see my ugly mug just slapped on the thumbnail, so it's pretty easy to find me on YouTube. I would say just check that out and get familiar with my free content. And if you're interested in taking full length courses, all my videos have a link to go to my website that has the full length courses. So I'd recommend
Great.
that approach.
Right. We will absolutely link probably your LinkedIn profile, your YouTube channel, and your website all in the show notes as well. So check there too.
Yeah, and reach out to me. I have a personal rule. I definitely answer every piece of either emails, YouTube comments, LinkedIn. I always answer anything that I get. I try to answer within the same day. So uh, if you have any questions, people hit me up with questions all the time. Like I got a question this morning. So if I'm doing fixed asset management, I'm trying to bring something in midlife cycle, blah 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 blah. If I know how to answer it, I'll take a crack at it.
Sure.
So feel free to ask me any questions you want. It's it's a little lonely being a one-man band for YouTube content. So when
I
I
get it.
get to hear from students and people, it's the best part of the job, hands down. So please don't feel like you're imposing. Be polite,
Yes.
but otherwise, I'd love to hear from you guys.
It absolutely is. Can confirm getting a comment, like a
Yeah.
really a sort of a comment, an email reply, whatever it is, a Slack message,
Hmm.
doesn't matter, showing that someone is engaged with the content, even if it's like I have a question about it or this wasn't clear or something like that, but it's something that shows they are engaged and enjoying the content, finding it useful.
Hmm.
Best part of the job,
So good.
by far.
Yeah. We didn't get into this for the money. We can both assure you. So
No,
please let us know you like it.
absolutely not. All right, Chris, thank you so much. I think that will bring this episode to the close. Like I said, we will have links to all of your stuff in the show notes. If you'd like to get in touch with me about the show, you can email me directly, eric@stoic.software. Thank you so much, Chris. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. And hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Hey, I'll be happy to have you back.